Hi, in this video I'm going to show you how to use TinyDB with Appinventor. So here you can see my emulator which I've started up, and the emulator basically is showing these components in this simple login form that I've created. So there is a text box for the login, a text box for a name. The user can then submit the data by clicking on this button, and I've also created two buttons for testing purposes. The non-visible components is obviously the TinyDB, a database, and a notifier for providing feedback to the user. Now, before actually going to the blocks and to program the application, I want to give you a better idea of how my database is going to look like. And for that reason, I created an Excel sheet. So, as you might remember, let me show you the blocks. To store values in a database, you need to have both a tag and a certain value to store. So you need to decide what sort of tag are you going to have and what is going to be the values to store. Now, as you can see, I have a value of a login and I have a value of a name that I want to associate with a certain user. So for that reason, I decided to actually use for a tag and number which I'm going to increment. So this is going to be my user 1 and this is going to be my user 2. And for the value, I'm going to use a list in order to add both the login and the name for each user. Now let's see how to do that in Appinventor. So since I'm going to disable this block for now, keep it on the side. Since I want to insert as values in my database a list, I'm going to first get whatever input the user gives me from the text boxes and insert them in a list. For that reason, I'm going to initialize a local variable which I'm going to name db values as an empty list. Now, the next thing that I need to do, I need to add items to my list that is called db values, and the first item is going to be the login that the user inserted in the text box. Now afterwards I need to add one more item, which is the name that the user inserted in the text box name. But let's review the outputs. Well, as you can see in the emulator, well, if I just add some value right here, well, actually now the code has inserted that item into the list, but since I cannot see the result of it, I'm going to use the notifier to see what actually has happened. Now, in order to do that, I need to call the for each item in the list block. Again, the list is going to be a db value, so I'm just going to duplicate this block and I'm going to call the notifier, which is right here, to show me what has actually happened. So I need to get that item and show the result of my action in the notifier. So if I bring back the emulator now, and I'm going to insert a new value and click on the button, I can see the result of that action. Now, in the next video, I'm actually going to show you how to insert that list now in the database. Hi, in this video we're going to continue working to insert user values in a database. And what we had left the work was to actually add certain items that the user inserted in the text boxes to a list. And then we display them in the notifier. For the time being, we're going to remove the notifier. And as we said, the purpose of this exercise is to add those values in the database. So here is the store value block, which I'm going to enable it and then place it right here. So as you can see, the store value block needs a value to store, and that's going to be the list that currently has only one item, the login item. So I still need to add the username item, and it needs a tag. Now, if you remember, as a tag, what I wanted to do is to have a number which I'm going to increment for every user. So for that reason, I need to actually add a second local variable, and I do that like this in Appinventor. And I'm going to give it a descriptive name, so I'm going to call it DB tag. Now I'm going to initialize it by actually getting the tags that already exist in the database. And in order to do that, I need to call the get tags procedure. Now, if you move your mouse over the block, you're going to get an indication of what to expect from this procedure. And what the indication actually says is that it's going to return a list of all of the tags in the data store, in other words, in the database. So what this procedure is going to do is going to return a list. Now, what we need is actually the length of the list in order to insert it in this local variable. In order to get the length of the list, we need to use the length of list block. So what this actually row does in blocks of Appinventor, it gets the tags that already exist in TinyDB 1, and then processes it as a length of list and inserts it in this variable. And actually, when our database is empty, it's obviously going to have a length of 0. So what we will need to do is, for that case, we will need to set the DB tag. We need to keep on increasing, in other words, the length of tags that already exist in the database. For that reason, we need to use the math block, get whatever value already exists in the DB tag variable, and increase it by 1. So now in the case that our TinyDB is empty, well, the length is going to be 0. So now this line of code is going to take that 0 value. Excuse me, this is actually here a mistake. What I needed to do is I needed to take the addition operator and not the equal operator. So initially our database has 0 tags, so the length of the list is going to be 0. So this the DB tag variable is going to have a value of 0. Now, so this is going to be 0. We're going to add it to 1. So then we're actually changing that variable into the value of 1. Now finally, what we have to do is to get then that value. Get that value and insert it in the tag. So now what we actually did is we have as a tag a value that is going to keep on increasing based on the length of the tags that already exist in the database, and we're going to have a value to store in the database that is going to be a list. Now finally, we're also going to add a feedback message to notify the user that their values have been successfully inserted. So let's check the emulator. So I'm going to bring back the emulator and I'm going to type in a login value. As you can see from our code here, I'm only taking into account the login right now, so not the name. So by clicking on submit data, the data will receive the message that the data was successfully inserted, but what has happened actually right now is that indeed the data has been stored in our TinyDB. Now in the next video, I'm going to show you how to actually clear the database for testing purposes and how to check the database again for testing purposes. And we're also going to add the second value in our form, or the second item in our form, which is the name.